Question.
So welcome everybody to this panel about the Trustless Manifesto, which is on the floor there. So with us we have people that, well, I think Vitalik needs no introduction, and I would say that Marissa and Yoav are on the account and chain abstraction team at the EF, working together with me on account abstraction, chain abstraction, EIL, all those interesting things. So a couple of days ago, about a week ago, I would say, the Trustless Manifesto was published. And I think it stirred up some conversation, and that's why we're all here, to kind of like continue this conversation and see what more we can expand on this. So the manifesto itself starts with the danger of drift towards trust and intermediaries. And I would ask, like, what moment or trend made you feel like this message needs to be written now? What was the trigger?
Yeah, I think when we were thinking about it, one of the things that we were seeing in the industry, specifically we were looking at the interop side of things, and we were seeing a lot of cases where the user was basically giving control of their funds, letting a intermediary know their intention. And we thought, why is this the case? Like, this doesn't have to be the case. And so we thought about really reinforcing some of the principles of Ethereum. Why are there all these interop solutions that don't abide, or that don't enhance Ethereum's values? And so we were thinking about this, and we saw the landscape, and we saw that there were a lot of trust assumptions, not just in interop, but in RPCs. People trust RPCs all the time. No one is verifying their data. We're thinking a lot about new interop standards to help improve trustlessness across the board. And verification. So we were seeing all of these things happen, and like Tom alluded to, trust, it's a drift. It is not a malintention set out from the beginning, but it happens slowly over time. And so we were seeing that, whether that was from RPCs, interop, front ends. Today, Arbiscan was down because Cloudflare was down. There are all of these Web3 front ends that actually really rely on Web2 back ends.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. We saw a very good demonstration today about the risks of trusting in a centralized way on an entity. And another thing, a very strong sentence that was said in the manifesto, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is that trustlessness is the thing itself. So can maybe each one of you briefly define what trustlessness means to you personally?
Okay, I'll start. So to define trustlessness, I first have to refer to how I define trust. And one way to think about trust, you trust someone who can hurt you. If someone can't hurt you in any way, you're not really trusting them. They can't do anything to you. So with that in mind, trustlessness is about not putting yourself in a position where they can hurt you. And we have so many examples of that in this space. Like, for example, the dependence on RPC and all of these are all good demonstrations of someone who actually can hurt you. They can lie to you about your balance or anything of that sort. We try to remove all of these cases where someone can hurt you.
No, I feel like I gave my presentation just now, and I think I ended up saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Okay, moving on. So I want to talk a little bit about L2s. So Ethereum's roadmap, in order to scale, it depends increasingly on L2s. How does this rise of rollups change the urgency of addressing and defining trustlessness?
Yeah, I think so. With these rollups, you have this long tail of chains that are, like, firstly, not discoverable to the user, or maybe not discoverable to the wallet, I would say. So you need all these standards around interop and how you can access and use more chains at scale. So you need things like client contracts, on-chain configs, standardized bridge wrappers to kind of create this easier way to access this long tail of chains. And when you have more chains, you have more places for there to be trust assumptions. You have more attack vector surface that you then need to think about, because not every chain is, I guess, designed the same, and some may rely on other things. So I think, like, thinking about this, as the number of chains grows, the more important it is for, like, the base layer, like Ethereum, to stay trustless. I think of it as kind of a pyramid. If Ethereum is like the base, and if Ethereum is not trustless, then nothing that is built on top of it can be. Because you can always build trust on top of trustlessness, but you can never build trustlessness on top of trust.
So building on a little bit on top of that, on how this whole concept of trustlessness has now trusted elements inside. One of the things that we talk a lot about is the role of decentralization, but the manifesto suggests the real risk is the access layer, like sequencers, RPCs, relayers, solvers. Which of these do you think is drifting fastest towards centralized defaults?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, they're all drifting, but some of them have been doing it for a while. So like RPCs, and for some of them we are seeing at least a direct for improvement, whereas in others we do not. So for example, sequencers, there is progress in decentralizing them, although right now most rollups are single sequencer. With RPCs, we can fix it with light client, and it's been going slow, but it's going. Now with relayers or with solvers, it's going in the other direction. It's actually, we are not seeing a process where the situation is improving, but instead it gets, I mean, the competition is mainly on price between them. So if you can do something cheaper by, for example, not verifying things on chain, then this is what most users will choose because it's cheaper. So that's where we see the most drift, in my opinion.
Okay. So going back to the manifesto, there were 3 laws of trustlessness defined there. No secrets, no indispensable intermediaries, and no unverifiable outcomes. And so I would ask, and Vitalik, maybe I'll point this one to you, if you could force one change across the entire ecosystem tomorrow that would best align with these 3 laws, what would it be?
I actually have a somewhat kind of oblique answer in that I would love to see like DApp UIs replace as much of their centralized stuff as possible with the RPC. And the reason why I say this is because it's not going to solve the problem today, but what it does do is that the RPC is one thing, and it's one target, and it's one target that we can improve, right? Because if you set up something that talks to the RPC, then if you as a user have a local phone node, which with Amsterdam will become much more viable, then you can immediately replace the RPC with that. If any of this, TE and ORAM, or even better, the PIR stuff to do trustless reads actually works, then you can immediately apply it, right? And so, I think in general in computer science, there's this common pattern where if you can force a problem into a standardized container, then you can have a lot of people work hard on improving the standardized container, and then that benefits everyone automatically, right? And I think it's the same here, right? And so actually, the more we do things through the RPC, the more we're actually creating a world where we can work hard on this one piece and improve it. We could give people better opportunities for actually reading data in a trustless way, and then that actually benefits people, right? Because the alternative is if you're talking to 100 hard-coded servers, even if we make the RPC perfect, still there's 99 other people who are seeing all of your private data.
And also Cloudflare can go down, and then that's also a problem. Okay, so another thing we talked about is delegation versus dependence in the manifesto, which I think is also an interesting subject. So the manifesto itself says that delegation may exist, but dependence must not. So what's an example of a place today where users think they're delegating, but they're actually depending?
So one example that I already mentioned is the RPC that you may think about is just a way to exit. You say, no, I'm just using it for convenience. But then let's say you sell me something in the real world, and I'm giving you 100 USDC for it. But if you go to an RPC, you actually depend on it to get your balance, and you're not running a local node, which again is right now a bit difficult to become easier. So you are not really, so you haven't delegated, you actually depend on it. If it doesn't tell you the right answer, you don't know the right answer. So that's like one example. Right, anyone else has good ones?
I mean, price oracles are one, right? Because it's easy to think of them as just being like UX convenience, but if a price oracle is like upstream of the price limit that you set on a swap, then that could be combined with a sandwich attack and extract a lot of money from you.
Yeah, so this is actually, since you bring up this dependency on oracles, this actually, it ties back to what we said about L2s, because one of my pet peeves about when we say that anyone can exit, that the L2s, that rollups are fine because you can always exit. So if the funds are in your account, then yeah, you can use the forced inclusion mechanism to exit. But if your funds are in a DeFi contract that has a dependency on an oracle, and now the sequencer goes down or sends off the oracle, now you can, it's not enough that you use the forced inclusion, now the oracle also needs to. So you now have a dependency. You can't even exit from the L2 without the oracle's help.
Yeah, or another example is like if you, let's say you have a position in Polymarket, right? And let's say we're in theoretically a better world, and let's say Polymarket is on a stage 2 L2, and let's say it has a rule that the governance has an upgrade window of 180 days, right? And like this looks like very nice. But then the problem is that the markets on Polymarket have potentially a resolution time of more than 180 days, right? Like a lot of the most interesting ones, like potentially 2 or 4 or 5 years, right? And so if the logic, like that internal logic is not cognizant of the fact that if something goes wrong on the L2, then you might need to like exit this position that's still kind of in flight, then potentially, you are actually still trusting the roll-up governance, even if, originally you don't think you were.
Okay, so I think that one of the things that we see when it comes to trustlessness and something that's challenging is UX. So there is sort of this tension between, on the one hand, you want to reduce the cognitive load for users, right? Like we can't expect everybody to be these kind of like uber conscious people over security and hold everything themselves. But on the other hand, we want to protect trustlessness. So any ideas on how we can resolve it without drifting to gatekeepers?
Yeah, I think that comes down to essentially of like a couple things. One is that the user should be aware of this and they should be able to make that choice. If let's say I'm sending, I don't know, $10, 10 USDC across chain, and I want to use the centralized relayer because it's only $10, that's a choice that the user should be aware of, and they should be aware of the risks and be able to make that choice for themselves. But I think like at the base layer, like trustlessness and things such as like the walk-away test, like can the user walk away from an app or protocol with their funds? Can there be forced inclusion in the L1 without depending on other things like such as an oracle, like Yoav mentioned? All of those things need to be, I guess, built into the application and protocol level.
Yeah, and one example that all this reminds me of is, I use, like IPFS. My blog is on IPFS, right? And the kind of standard works for everyone way to use IPFS is, of course, to put .limo after the .eth, and then there's like a centralized forwarder, and it's like nice and convenient, right? But then, you're exposed in 3 ways, right? One of them is like, what if .limo goes down? 2 is what if .limo feeds you the wrong information? And then 3 is what if .limo gets your personal data and your access patterns. And I remember like Brave, right? Like it had this feature where it basically you could put in .eth and it would use its own internal way to like try to actually fetch the data, right? But then the thing I discovered is like I gave up on using it and I just like switched to using .limo. And the reason is that it took about the specific forwarder that they used, it was like actually pretty low quality, right? It took about 10 seconds, sometimes for it to load, sometimes it would not load different things at all. And it basically, it ended up just not actually being, fit for purpose at all at that time, right? And so for that particular case, the question is like, well, what is the best experience that you actually can give, especially, given this like set of constraints, right? Where probably some people have specialized software, some people don't. Some people are more paranoid about ETH.limo getting your data, some people are not. Like some people care like access data that's more likely to be censored. And like one of the classic techniques is, of course, the kind of, like the one of n approach, where like you have a request and you send it out to like 5 different servers and also to the decentralized network, and whoever answers first, like you actually check their answer, and if it matches the hash, then you accept it. And like this is nice in that perspective, but then it also has the weakness that you're like exposing your data to like 5 different servers. So it's like in a lot of these situations, I think it actually is this kind of like subtle mix of different trade-offs, and often like you have to figure out something that like actually solves all of the different problems, and like often even like with things, sometimes with things like PIR you actually can, which is interesting, but like it does get application specific, and there are challenges, I think, in like communicating to the user, like what are the properties that you get and what you don't get. Like we also don't want to replicate, the GDPR dystopia where like you have to like check a checkbox and everyone forgets what the checkbox actually means. So this is like an area to highlight where I think there's actually unsolved problems, and like you can do some work and figure out how to improve them.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think a lot of us are just so quick to click the approve or like accept all terms and conditions and not read them. But then I think the question is like, what is the right way to like inform the user of the risks? And I think like wallets are starting to tackle this, with some of the things, the initiatives around clear signing, to let the user know exactly what they're signing. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
Now, I wanted to add that since you brought up the cognitive load, I think that actually it's on us, on builders, to try to reduce it by building systems to be trustless by default where possible. Because when it's not possible, when this is not trustless, now the user has to comprehend what risks am I taking by performing this action. Like, who can hurt me here? Who can steal my funds? Who can censor me? So even, I don't know if in every case we can make everything as trustless, but in every case where we can make it trustless, this should be our choice, and this actually reduces the cognitive load. The user doesn't have to think about it because, I'm not at risk. If I'm not at risk, I don't have to think about it too much.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as an iceberg, where the top of the iceberg is kind of, you have hosted UI, you have this great UX, you have all of these things. And then underneath the water, you have things like trust dependencies, et cetera, like all of those things that go underneath it. And I think the challenge as builders is to build that underneath system in a trustless way so that you can then put the great UX on top of it.
Yeah, and I guess the question of how we can actually, design UX so users can choose convenience without, making the protocol dependent on intermediaries. Maybe that's a bigger question to answer right now in the panel, but I think that's a very interesting question to kind of like consider afterwards in other talks. And so when you mentioned talking to servers and asking for questions, it kind of brought up the whole concept of financial incentives, because if you have a server, someone's paying for that, and trustlessness doesn't work if it's not properly incentivized. Ethereum works and Bitcoin works because at the end of the day, the miners or the block builders, in case of Ethereum, they can work and they know they'll make money. And we kind of count on the fact that individuals, if they can make money, they will do it, and they will do it kind of like they don't care about what you want to transact, and it will just work. There's no kind of like something in the middle where they have to decide, oh, do I want to do this, okay? And so the manifesto itself says that a protocol that relies on unpaid altruism will decay, and a protocol that rewards control will centralize. So what do you think is the sustainable incentive design for, as trustless as possible systems?
That's a very application-specific question. I think it'll have a lot of application-specific answers.
Yeah, so the general answer is mechanism design. It's at, we want in-protocol fees to incentivize, because if there's no, if there is no incentive to do something, then economy, I mean, basically like economy 101 teaches us that something is not going to sustain if it's not profitable. And if it's profitable by some externalities, not by fees, not by something in the protocol, then bad things, tend to happen. So we need protocols to be designed in a way that to reach a shelling point where earning the protocol fees is the best, it is the winning strategy. And yeah, it differs between protocols, but that's something that every protocol designer should take into account.
Okay, so in your eyes, like, what role do neutral and open source client teams and independent operators play in preserving trustlessness as we start scaling? Like, how do we make that work?
You're referring to the Ethereum? Okay, fine. Well, see, this is a good example of redundancy in action, right? And just like when this microphone failed, Marissa's microphone came up to save my ability to answer the question. Back in 2016, when we had the Shanghai DOS attacks, the Geth client completely crashed, and Parity with the other Ethereum client was still able to run and process the blocks. And then a few days later, Parity crashed, and Geth was able to come in and save the day, right? And so I think the fact that we had multiple clients actually really did save us back then. And now, of course, Ethereum has a lot of consensus clients, a lot of execution clients, and none of them have more than about 40% of the network. And so there's no bug in any single client that would be able to cause the Ethereum network to go down, which is pretty amazing. That's not something that's true of basically any other decentralized network, right? Even Bitcoin is not does not have that, and so I think it's a good example of how it's always valuable to have multiple levels of resilience and defense in depth, including against things like software bugs.
Yeah. Okay, that's a very good point. So if each of you had to choose one metric to measure, we talked about in the manifesto about trust reduced per transaction. That's a very nice term. And if you had to choose one metric to measure it, what would it be?
I think to measure trustlessness, I think the way to measure that is the walkaway test. Can the user exit a blockchain, a app with their funds intact? Can they do this in a way that is anyone could do this? I don't mean they have to run 12 different scripts and it's very complicated. I mean actually do this, and they're not relying on any other trusted dependency in order to do that. And then in terms of protocol, I would just say also forced inclusion to the L1. Can I force my transaction down as well?
Yeah, I think the other kind of the one that's suitable for the pessimistic short term is number of people who can rug you, right? As I mentioned in my presentation, often the problem, relative to the status quo, if only one person can rug you, that's almost a utopia, right? And we have this big zoo of 14 different dependencies of dependencies, and if you can enumerate that number and look at the software libraries, and who is serving you the UI, and the code in your wallet, and the blockchain itself, and also your operating system, and then ultimately hardware as well, and try to track that number, and then continue to find ways to push that number down over time. I think that's something that can really rally our ecosystem around really improving things quite a bit in the short term.
Yeah, I think that's one vector is how many, and then I think there's another vector of how bad. Mm-hmm. So how many people, and then how bad can they hurt you in the end, and both of them combined together.
Okay, so we're starting to get to the end of this panel. So if someone were to sign the Trustless Manifesto, what is one concrete change they should make in how they build or use Ethereum tomorrow?
Right. So my gold standard is going to be the walkaway test that we keep coming back to. It's if a builder commits to always be thinking in terms of what happens if what happens if everyone, including myself, goes rogue? Like either we go away, or worse yet, I want to screw with my users. What is the recourse? Like how? So what will how bad can I hurt my own users, me or anyone else, any component in the system, and how easy is it for them to recover? And it goes and it comes in different flavors and with different levels. For example, like maybe technically, like in the case of a rollup, they can't, so technically the user can exit, but how many rollups actually offer a tool in IPFS, something that doesn't require their server and helps them to exit? And so as a developer, you should always be thinking, what happens if I decide, if I stop being aligned with my own users? Are they still safe? Will they still be able to use the system or at least exit?
Yeah, I think anyone coming from security would be of the mindset that it's not necessarily me going rogue, but someone took over my system and now I'm rogue by, I don't have a choice. So you kind of have to keep that mindset, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like you can even think of it selfishly. It's reducing the extent to which you yourself as a developer become the target.
Exactly. And so before we take questions from the audience, I would kind of finish with this question. So what does a fully trustless L2 rich Ethereum look like in 2030? Like what's the optimistic vision of where we should be?
I think, so first of all, I expect, we'll have a lot more L1 scaling to the point where a lot of applications are able to run on L1 directly, and at the same time we'll have things like ZK EVMs, and so like basically everyone's wallet, including phone wallets, including browser wallets, will also be fully verifying wallets. This is important. Then to take the scalability even further above that, we will have lots of stage 2 rollups that have instant settlements that settle down to the L1 every block, and where there are standardized easy protocols for moving your assets in and out of them, ideally efficient enough so that even default flows don't necessarily go through a server. Then we needs to have wallets that are able to actually interpret all of these things in a standardized way, ideally in a way where even if new L2s come into the picture, like the real mathematical utopia, right, is like if a new L2 comes into existence, then it comes with some kind of formally verified proof of its security, and then wallets are able to automatically interpret that proof, and then if an application asks you to move your funds in there, then it still tells you that your coins are safe. But even like before we could get to that kind of level, right? Like being like wallets being able to tell you like how safe are your funds if you take a particular action, and ideally we move away from this world where you need to like do 5 clicks for everything, but where it's like a risk-based approach, and like it's a very easy or even 0 click to move $10, but on the other hand, there's a lot more security and a lot more checks behind moving $100,000. Then the UIs from the privacy side, I hope we can like really take like server minimization much more seriously, and we can even have more frameworks that try to make things much more local first by default, and then when things have to go offline, for them to or go online in trust minimized ways, and like we really start thinking not just about the blockchain, but also about like full supply chain security.
Okay, I think we have questions from the audience, so I'll turn to the lovely Brit.
Yeah, we've got a couple questions. We'll see what we can get through. Thank you for submitting them. The first is, do you think it's possible to have a trustless LLM these days?
It depends what that means, right? Like I have, Q133B on a laptop, and like it, it does things. It's definitely like a step, quite a step less efficient than like full-on, like GPT level things. I think, like there is this kind of trade-off of like, especially if you're a nomad, of like how many watts the thing you're consuming and like the convenience trade-off and all that, right? And there's like this curve of use cases where for things like translation, like LLMs that can run on a phone are totally good enough. For things like debugging your newest discovery in quantum physics, like realistically, even GPT lies about that half the time, right? And so it's like way up there on the curve, right? But then the other challenge, of course, is like even if you have a local LLM, like what was the supply chain that was used to create that LLM? Like are there bugs in the LLM that is like that? Are there deliberate backdoors inserted into the LLM that is a thing that exists? And it would be really cool if we could have like zk and arcs with 1.1x overhead, and so we could prove a full training pipeline. And like I think we're less far from that than we think, but we're also quite far from that.
Yeah.
But
the data set is still,
Indeed, the
even
data
if you
set,
prove
yeah,
the whole
yeah.
thing, proving what data set it was trained on, that's the real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're out of time, but I've got one more quick one. It was the highest voted one. Are centralized stablecoins a risk to trustlessness?
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's it depends on what they are pegged to and how. So yeah, that's you can have different flavors of them. If it's something that is pegged to the US dollars and it doesn't depend on over collateralization like MakerDAO used to do, then there has to be some centralized party such as a bank account holding US dollars. So in that sense, yeah, it cannot be trustless. But even then, you can have a spectrum of trustlessness. For example, you can have a token. You can have a token where the on-chain presence of the token, once it's minted, it is not. There are no whitelists. There's no freeze functions, and then it's so even though during onboarding you have to know about. During onboarding there is a bank involved and someone can censor you. Once it's on-chain, at least we can be protected. So I don't see how it can be 100% trustless while pegged to the dollar, because the dollar itself is not trustless, but we can approximate.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it ties into what Marissa said before, is that you can build trusted on top of trustlessness, but it can go the other way around, and the US dollar by definition is trusted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Big round of applause for our fireside chat.
Oh, and just one last plug. If you guys haven't, you guys should sign the Trustless Manifesto on-chain. There's a bunch out there.
All right, make sure you sign that Trustless Manifesto. And there is going to be a coffee break. We'll see you back in a couple minutes.